think he controls it. All right. Good morning. Welcome to our final all-in forum for this kind of academic year. We've had the pleasure of having an opportunity to hear from some of our staff and lay leaders throughout the year about different ministries. Last month, we heard an update from P&E about our Envision Task Force. And I'm so grateful for our grants committee today and the leadership of grants to tell us a little bit more about the work they do and answer any questions you may have. But I'd ask that you join me in prayer. God of grace, on this Mother's Day, we celebrate those who nurture and love during all stages of life and in all circumstances. We give praise that no one is beyond the reach of your love or outside your limitless mercy. We give thanks for this day and for the opportunity to work in your world. Bless our time together this morning as we learn more about one dimension of that work, the allocation of financial grants. We are deeply grateful for the generosity and abundance of this congregation, which enables the awarding of financial grants, and for the team within our mission and outreach ministry who so carefully, lovingly, and prayerfully discerns the distribution of these resources in a world with seemingly insatiable financial needs. May we all be energized by your call to love and serve others and have that call sharpened this morning as we hear about tangible examples of that call in action in our community. Grant us all individually and as your collective faith community that is Covenant Presbyterian Church, the wisdom, strength, and joy to be all in as we continue to live into our vision of being a dynamic Christian community that gladly invites all people into a transformational experience of faith, boldly proclaims the gospel, bravely works toward a whole and just world, and passionately nurtures discipleship. In your name we pray. Amen. So we're pleased to have with us today Mandy Rencher, who is our Director of Mission and Outreach, Katie Coley, who is the current chair of the Grants Committee, and Derek Thomas, who has faithfully served on grants for many years as past chair and is currently still active on that committee. So thank you for your work and for being here to share a little bit more about grants. And Mandy, I think we'll start with you and ask, what's the purpose of the Grants Committee? How does it work? And how does it align with Covenant's broader mission?
Just starting with a small question. um, well, we have a mission statement for the Grants Committee that I want to read to y'all. It is the calling and purpose of the Grants Committee of the Session of Covenant Presbyterian Church to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ by extending God's love beyond our congregation. The work of this committee is to send an offering into the community, providing a ministry of money and encouragement with God's children who cry out for help. In response to God's grace, our mission is to participate in holistic partnership with organizations which provide hope and dignity to those in the severest need. So I think that the mission statement of the Grants Committee is so tied obviously to the church's mission statement in that we are proclaiming the gospel by demonstrating God's love through action and generosity. We are pursuing a just and whole world by supporting partners focused on hunger, housing, education, and vulnerable families. And we are nurturing discipleship by engaging the church community in faithful stewardship and outreach. And it aligns with our church leadership by operating under Covenant's broader vision and thoughtfully directing resources to trusted partners, reinforcing the church's commitment to transformational faith and action.
I think one of the tenets of our mission statement is transformational kind of awareness, and whether that's an experience or that's being willing to be nimble and transform to the needs of our society. Derek, we mentioned you've been a part of this and have some perspective of years and time. Can you talk a little bit about how the Grants Committee has evolved, has transformed itself even over the years to better meet the needs and the mission statement?
Absolutely, and it's been a great privilege for me to be part of this. I remember back in the beginning for me, it was Carla Leaf who had asked me to participate, and to say that I was concerned about my ability to contribute would be an understatement. I was not familiar with all the different organizations that are in Charlotte. They all do great work, ones that would be aligned with the mission of the church. And so um, that that at the very beginning was important to me. But through Carla's leadership and Lucy's leadership and now Mandy's leadership, there's been great continuity throughout the years, and especially as we think about how do we make sure that we have new people coming in, how we have that continuity throughout the years. So I would say as far as the structure, we'll talk about that here in a moment, I'm sure. It's a lot like the session, right? Where you have a third, a third, and a third in terms of the people who are on the committee. That was not always the case. It has become the case a little bit before COVID, I would say, really was implemented in terms of having, a third of the people roll off every year and a third of the class, a third of the group come in every year. Um, from there, I would also talk about the number of organizations that we support. In the beginning, when I say the beginning is, again, before COVID, we were supporting about 2 dozen mission partners out there. Now it's about 1 dozen. And now you think, whoa, how do we cut so many? We also got to remember what's going on in terms of the industry. We're thinking about organizations like Roof Above, which used to be Urban Ministry and Men's Shelter, right? That combined, that was 2, now it's 1. Same thing with like Loaves and Fishes and Friendship Trays. They've got Nourish Up. So that kind of consolidation in the industry was one thing. But then also we had this capital campaign that we're all aware of, where we were really encouraged across the congregation to be bold. And so to go from having 24, 27 different organizations to now about 12, it enabled us to really think more critically, how can we make a meaningful impact on these different organizations? And so we established a tier structure. Instead of just giving like hundreds of dollars here, we can now give thousands of dollars and make a bigger impact rather than spreading ourselves so thin. So I think we're now able to make a bolder impact on those partners that we do have.
And I think we have a slide that Katie might build on what Derek was talking about a little bit about the committee and the structure and how that works. Ta-da!
Derek said, we serve 3-year terms. And when we're choosing members for the committee, we take into account people who have expressed interest in being on the committee and learning about it. We also take into consideration longtime members of the church who would bring a lot of the church's tradition and history to the committee, as well as new members who would bring in outside new information, new ideas, new thoughts. And people of membership of all lengths of time, as well as age. We do take age into consideration, not in a good way. Sorry, not in a bad, not in a bad way, because we like older members who have experience, as well as younger members who would bring new thoughts to the table. Sorry, it's horrible. So that's how our committee is chosen.
I would just add that there is that the church staff serves on the committee as well. So the mission and outreach director, the pastoral resident, and then one member of the mission and outreach committee serves as a liaison each year to be the connection point.
Yeah, and I think that also important. I think that also helps us stay aligned with the leadership of the church. So whenever our leadership, whether it's Bob or Grace or Catherine, are out and they're talking with our partners, there's no surprises. It's all very much aligned, and so I think that's part of having that continuity.
So Derek, I think you're going to talk a little bit about the process, right? And what this looks like about the kind of yearly effort to solicit needs, to evaluate them, and then to actually make the grant. So can you talk a little bit about that process?
So yes, so this is really based on a calendar year. And so our leadership this year, Katie goes through and we look at those organizations that we've partnered with, who we should stay in touch with, who we want to make sure that we continue to support. But it really begins in the spring, and we think about the calendar, and this is really, so we're set right now for 2025. The decision has been made in terms of which organizations and how much each organization will receive. That was all made last year for this year. It's all approved by the session. So when we're talking about the budget, we're all set. We're now this year focused on what will be distributed in 2026. And so part of the process, the evaluation is to look at different organizations. We'll schedule time to go visit them, or at least some of them that we, maybe we haven't visited them like last year or the year before. So we will make sure that we stop by and visit them this year, see what they do, talk with their staff members. We also want to talk about inviting some of those folks onto our campus as we think about that process there too. We want to make sure that folks feel comfortable in knowing more about these people. It's a lot like a college admissions process, right? We want to know as much as we possibly can about these organizations. So as you think about it, a college, they might want to know grades and transcripts and classes and rigorous of coursework and essays and, well, what are you doing outside? We want to do the same thing too here, and being on campus or being at the local, the Mission Partners organization, there's nothing we can do to substitute that. That's just some of our most fun thing. I almost said funnest. That's one of our most fun things to do. Is to do that. And then we identify those organizations that really align with the church, with the mission of Covenant, and how we can interact with them. One important thing is too, is when we look at these different organizations, we also want to make sure that they are able to have volunteers from our congregation participate. We do not want this to be a transactional thing where we just write a check and send it to them. We want to make sure that there's a two-way street in terms of being able to have our congregation volunteer too. So.
Great. Are there, I know you were talking about like us looking out to our partners. Is it also an open application where there's an opportunity for people to just understand maybe for the first time, or is it always an existing relationship?
That's a great question. So we have some great partnerships already, and we see every reason to continue those partnerships, but we also are aware of there could be some other great ones out there. And so we do rely on the suggestions from the congregation to point out. And that's how like two of our most recent additions were from individuals or groups that we knew were important. The work of these different organizations was important to them. And so we did consider them. Were you gonna say something? Yeah. So I think that's part of it. So we're not just locked in with the ones, but we also really count on the congregation to provide suggestions of ones that we should do. We do try to get as many. How many did we have last year? There were probably twice as many submitted an application as what we were able to finally 3 times as many. So we get a lot, and they all do great work. It's just some may align more closely. Maybe they're more entrenched with the neediest of our community. Maybe they do some other work that's not overlapping with other organizations. It just depends. But we're always open to new partnerships.
I think that leads us right into so much good work happening by so many organizations. But at the end of the day, your committee has some evaluation criteria and has some priorities. Can you talk about how you get from that all of the good work to the ones that we are going to particularly partner with and award a grant to?
That's another great question. So they need to be a nonprofit organization. They must be local. We need to make sure that we, Covenant, are not the only sources of revenue or support for these organizations, nor do we want to be the majority of that support, because we would not want there to be a problem with that organization if priorities at Covenant changed. We want to make sure that they completely stay independent. So those are some of the things that we take a look at when it comes to which organizations that will provide support to. We've already talked about the transactional part of it, right? We want to make sure that there are organizations, there are opportunities at those organizations that we can send our congregation, members of the congregation to. Covenant Impact Charlotte is a great example of it. So I'm not sure how many of you have participated in Covenant Impact Charlotte, but that is very intentional in terms of the organizations that we select to support on that particular day. Many of them you're going to recognize when we talk about which organizations specifically receive a grant from Covenant. A lot of them are very much the same ones that you'll see at Covenant Impact Charlotte, and that's intentional because of the partnership. And I can't ever emphasize the word partnership enough in this endeavor. There's a lot of our text. We can go through specific ones, but
Can you
there's some of the key
talk
ones.
a little bit about the 4 pillars? and kind of, because I think that's overarching for some of the work that happens across mission and outreach.
So yeah, so when we talk about hunger and homelessness and families, vulnerable families, that really is like that's really our North Star. It really helps us continue, even though we may have 3 people rolling off one year and 3 new people rolling on, having that North Star of knowing what is important to Covenant, what is important to as members of Covenant and as Christians, those are the pillars that we look to. So when you look at the roof aboves and the crisis assistances of the world and the nourish ups of the world, they all fall perfectly in line with those pillars that we have. Not one of them falls outside of it. And we make it sure it's very easy that they fall into those buckets, because that just helps keep us, very much in the guardrails in terms of what we believe the congregation is counting on us to do.
Yeah, so Mandy, we touched a little bit on this, but can you talk a little bit about how the committee does balance that supporting our longstanding partners with being open to possibility, the blessing of a new relationship? And also you've got up here a little bit about the variety of money requests, like how do you balance large grants with small requests, longstanding partners with new? Talk a little bit about that for us.
Yeah, thank you. So in preparation for this, I went out to breakfast with Carla Leaf to review the history. I've been here just under 2 years and have learned so much, but really did want to talk with her again about some of the things Derek has alluded to, of how we in the past Covenant had close to 30 nonprofit partners, and how the decision was made to decrease that number in order to increase the depth of the relationships. And so when that happened, that is when these 4 pillars were decided, because there's so much that we would care about, that would be within the mission of the church, that would be in the hearts of the church members, that we would want to support. But you just can't do everything well. And so just that idea of an inch deep and a mile wide is kind of how it maybe had gotten to be, and all in good intentions, because every year when we receive these applications, there's no application that you receive that you're like, well, that's a really bad nonprofit. And we don't think they're doing great work in the community. It's just overwhelming, the applicants and the amazing work being done by all these different nonprofits that reach out to us through the application process. So, so having the focus areas of hunger, housing, vulnerable families, and education just keeps us focused. So that is one thing of the timeline of when that happened, was maybe about 10 years ago, that there was, I'm glad that I wasn't here then, because I can't imagine being in the committee when those decisions had to be made of who to let go of. And so that got us down to about a dozen partners. And within those partners, we would consider that our partnerships have 3 tiers. So there's the longest standing partnerships that receive the largest grants. And Katie will talk about those in a minute. But that, again, is Roof Above, that also it was the men's shelter and urban ministry center, and they've combined. Nourish Up, which was Loaves and Fishes and Friendship Trays before, and Crisis Assistance Ministry, which is our longest partner, that began here at Covenant 50 years ago. So those are our tier 1 grant recipients that receive the largest grants, and that we've been partners with for the longest time, and are so involved with ways that church members are connected there, and outreach opportunities that we have. So again, to go back to Derek saying relationship, that is the key thing. We ask 2 questions on our application, and one of them is, how are Covenant members involved with your nonprofit, and how could we be? It's that important that it's one of the 2 questions that we ask. We also ask for some documentation with different things, with their financials and their board members and their 501c3 status. There's a list you can see up there, the criteria. But of the 2 questions, we whittled the application down too, because we just are like, what's the heart of what we want to know? And that is one of the most important things. So then there's the tier 2 grant recipients, who receive a mid-range amount around, I don't want to steal Katie's thunder, but they receive kind of a mid-range amount. And then there's what we call tier 3 grant recipients that when they're coming in new, that they receive a small grant. And it's a little bit like we're dating, and it's sort of saying like, this is a time for us to get to learn about you and how we could be involved, and for us to figure this out. And that would be it's not a trial, what kind of it's a trial period, but it is a chance to see, we appreciate the work you're doing. There's Covenant members deeply invested there, but what can we build, and what can this look like? I think I've answered all of the questions.
Thank you. So Katie, without further ado, can you share with us the 2025 grant recipients and talk a little bit about, you've got some historical trends, anything you want to highlight here, but share with us the good news of our 2025 grants.
So these are the recipients of grants for 2025. And as Mandy said, we have tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. And you can see Wayfinders and Foster Village are our two newest. So Wayfinders was brought in 2024, and then Foster Village this year, 2025. So they had the smallest amount because we're in the getting to know you period, the dating period, as Mandy said. We're gonna see how the relationship grows and builds, and how involved we are with them and they with us. And hopefully that relationship will continue to grow, and we will give them more money in future years. At the same time, we take into consideration other applications, and if anyone else should be supported in the future. But for this year, these are the award winners.
Will you read them for people that?
Oh, sorry. So it's kind of tiny for me too. Our top our top recipient is Crisis Assistance Ministry, with whom we have partnered for 50 years. Roof Above is next. Do you want me to read amounts? Yeah.
Is that helpful for y'all if we read them out?
Yeah.
I think they're
So
separate.
Crisis Assistance received 45,000. Roof Above received 35,000. Nourish Up, formerly Loaves and Fishes Friendship Trays, received, is it 28 or 26? 28,000. Supportive Housing, 11,000. Charlotte Family Housing, 10,000. Freedom School, which is located on our campus, 10,000. Center for Community Transition, 10,000. Hope Haven, 10,000. Relatives, 10,000. QC Family Tree, 7,000. Wayfinders, 3,000, and Foster Village, 1,000.
And I think one of the important things of looking at this is having the trends. This is all about being transparent. This is where the money is going. This money is part of a bucket that falls within mission and outreach. So the session approves money for mission outreach. This is a bucket of money that goes specifically to the local grants. And you can see the trends. There's a good pattern here over the past several years of consistency. We don't want any of our partners to think that we're up one year, down one year by dramatic amounts. I mean, there may be fluctuations based on budget that we have every year from stewardship and so forth. But at the end of the day, you can see some remarkable consistency from year to year, and you would hope that's the case in the spirit of true partnership, in terms of how these mission partners can count on us. So that's really one of the purposes of showing this information is not just this year where the money is going, but how that has played out over the past several years. That text that's above those bar charts, there are some organizations that have fallen off, that will not receive a grant this year. And again, in full transparency, just want to know if you were to add up all the dollar amounts, well, where's this extra 9,000 or 12,000? It's all in what we would consider other. Those are the ones that are no longer receiving grants this year, but they did maybe last year or the year before. I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. And I'm looking at this, and you guys tell me, but would it be true to say that maybe CCT, which is the Center for Community Transitions, is one that has kind of came in and has kind of worked its way a little bit from the dating tier 1, and now we've seen over the course of several years that we've got active involvement with them. They have come to speak here at Covenant many times. We have a circle that goes there, Covenant Impact Charlotte Day. So an example of where a relationship has sort of is growing over time, and it started out small, and that is increasing a little bit based on feeling out that there is that mutual connection, and that the people are being connected just like the dollars are.
That's a great way of saying it. And there have been examples in the past where we thought there'd be a great partnership, and it turned out, we were able to contribute the financial, but there didn't turn out to be as many volunteer opportunities for one reason or another. And so those kind of partnerships kind of fizzled out. And just to be true to the spirit of partnership and what our congregation is trying to do in the community, not just writing a check, but also getting out there, putting the hands out there to help others. That's really where you see it sing.
So the grants get awarded. The organizations continue to do their good work. Mandy, can you talk a little bit about kind of the back end evaluation or checking in to make sure that things are kind of going as expected, both in terms of kind of the financial stewardship and the human connection between our congregation and the organization?
Of course. Well, I think just your example with CCT it's so nice to hear like a real story. So another practical story is that when we were going through the grants process 2 years ago, we realized that we really were not very connected with the relatives. So we went to visit, and everybody was so impressed with the organization, but we just recognized that, I mean, a lot of these relationships changed during and after COVID. And so it's been a process of figuring out, like, well, how does that relationship look now? What are their needs and what are our capabilities? So with the relatives, again, we recognized through the grant application process in our committee meeting, like, gosh, we aren't really connected to them anymore. And so we met with them and learned about different opportunities that they had and needs that they had. And this year, the high school youth has started partnering with them. And so the high school youth spends one Sunday a month with them, and they either go to the house on East Boulevard and serve dinner, or sometimes they'll go to their facility on Freedom Drive and play games or do different things there, and have bonfires. And the Thomas is probably no better than I do all that they do with their girls going. But it was just a chance where we saw like that when that partnership is kind of struggling, and it is our responsibility to meet with the partners and try to figure out like what's going on and what could this be, and to work on it. So that is where I think that the resident pastor in my role is kind of the liaison between the grants committee and then the work that the mission and outreach committee and church do. So that's an example of that. Let's see, other parts of your question. For the impact of the grants, we do give unrestricted grants, which I think is very important. So you're not going to know like, oh, the summer reading program went well and that's what we're funding. So it's about the overall health of the organization. And I think we know about that through being in these organizations and talking with the partners, and from church members sharing things with us and our volunteers sharing things with us. And then we learn a lot about it through the application process. Again, there's always, when Katie was sharing about how we select who's in there, we do always think like, do we have some good number of people in there? Because it's a lot to weed through the financial statements. And there's always Derek and at least one other person who love doing that and consolidate that information for the rest of the team. Like, here's the overall things. Do you want to speak to that, like what you look for?
Yeah, that's a great way. I mean, that diversity word is so important as we're building a team and as we're looking for new. And we count on folks like you and others in the congregation to really suggest or potential members to be on the committee. That's really what we want, is diversity of thought. And so there may be some people who really enjoy numbers, or maybe really enjoy looking at the financials. How much is the administrative staff or the leadership of the organization getting of the total revenues that organization gets? What different programs do they have? What audiences are they serving? Those are critical in this. And as we go through the process, and as Mindy was talking, as we get closer and closer, so we'll visit, let me just give you a little bit this may be a little bit in the weeds, and I know my wife doesn't want me to get sometimes I get too much in the weeds when I talk about numbers and stuff like that. I'll be careful. We start the process in spring, where we set up the calendar. Katie and Mandy, the leadership, set up the calendar. In the summer months of June and July, that's when we go on our visits. The applications are really due at end of August. That's when all the organizations are asked to submit online, how much they're requesting, where the money would go, some information about their financials. And then after that, our team, all 12 of us, will noodle over that. And some will be drawn more to the financials, and some will be more drawn towards programming and so forth that I was explaining. And then we'll come together. And if we haven't heard from maybe an organization, they may come on campus in the September timeframe. But October we'll meet, and this is the toughest meeting that we'll have all year. This is the meeting where each person has one vote for each organization, gets to vote for each organization in terms of where they would like the money to be distributed. And so we'll take these. I mean, you say we had 2 or 3 times the number that we can support. Let's say 30 organizations that we'll go through and determine, and we'll go around the room and we'll talk about something that somebody noticed, or, oh, I didn't see that. Let's talk about that. We'll go through that about each organization to see how they fit or may not fit into what aligns with Covenant's mission. And then from there, we'll leave that particular meeting knowing who will get a grant. We don't know how much. That'll be for a subsequent meeting, but we'll know how much, we'll know which organizations will, quote unquote, be in. And unfortunately, those that are out. And the out is so tough because every single one of these fits, like they're a nonprofit, they're local, they check a lot of the boxes, but we still have to say no. And that's all in the spirit of staying bold and making a meaningful impact on those who we do contribute money to. So hopefully that didn't get too much in the weeds, but I want you to know how that process goes. We go around the room and we vote on who will get a grant for the following year. And in the final meeting, that's when we'll get to the amounts. We'll look at historical amounts. We'll look at a number of different things to make sure that we're being good stewards of the money.
Thank you for sharing that. Can you, so I know there's some tough, intense periods. Can you also maybe share some moments that might have taken your breath away, or that were particular highlights, or moments of joy or excitement or kind of revelation through some of the recent cycles, and kind of give us a flavor of that side of the process, connections, learnings that excited you?
I can talk about a couple. I mean, I kind of alluded to one that was a little bit surprising. Like, there was a partnership that we were really hoping to get going. It was an organization that, in the spirit of partnering with those in the community who are people of color, we really wanted to support them financially and really build up this partnership. But we learned after getting into the partnership that from a volunteering standpoint, it was about tutoring in classrooms, and they really wanted the leadership, the people who the kids saw in the classroom, to also be people of color that they could look up to. It made sense, right? The tough thing is, with covenants, how we look, we don't have as much of that to offer at this point. And so that was a really tough thing for us to continue on. And that's really where it became just a transactional situation. I think from a delightful and a surprising way was when we go to some of these lunch and learns and we hear in some cases, the kids, I'm going to say the kids because they are kids, like whether it's their relatives or elsewhere, talk about what this organization has meant to them. I'm blown away, and there's no substitute for that. Whenever you actually hear about, as we hear about benefiting from the good work that these organizations do, that's where the conversations in that room, that second to last meeting, that meeting where we're talking like who's going to be in, who's going to be out. That's where those kinds of stories really come out, and we hear how different members of our team were moved by that. Maybe it's about the professionalism of some of these places. The relatives, they are very professional. They are buttoned up. It's like you go to the resource center on the Freedom Drive. It's like going to a corporate meeting. It's not stuff you don't get that way, but they're very intentional. They know how to present themselves. They have a great plan. They are doing good work, and that makes an impact on whenever we're deciding to allocate limited funds, knowing that they're going to use it in a smart way. So I don't know if that one on the not so good side and one on the really good side that I would say are really some highlights that I learned.
For me, it's been the lunch and learns. In June, July, and August, we choose 3 partners and we go to one each month. Last year, we went to, looking at our chart, the Relatives, Hope Haven, and Charlotte Family Housing. And we take lunch to them and they sit down with us and they give us a presentation and a tour of their facility. And it's incredibly educational to learn about what they do. And it's helpful to see to us to see how the impact that they have on the community and how we can be involved and how they can be involved with us. So it's the lunch and learns that have been huge. And this year we are going to let's see if I can Freedom School, supportive housing, and Foster Village. Those are going to be our three for this summer. And I'm looking forward to all three of those because I know very little about those organizations.
And the hope is every 3 years that we get to everybody, right? So we think about the 12 or so, either get on campus to visit them, three, and then maybe the other 2 or 3 at the end would come on our campus, right? Maybe in that second last meeting. So we will be very close to each of those organizations. And of course, as any new ones come on, we'd want to go visit them too.
Say what was probably like the most one of the most positive surprises and hardest things was the number of incredible applicants and just seeing all the good work that's going on in our community, that when there is a need, that there are a group of people who come together and address that in a loving way, in a very professional, supportive way. And so it is a privilege to get to learn about all the organizations. And then it's also just, I mean, to me, that's the hardest part of the grants process, is what Derek was talking about with the October meeting, of when you can just have people who are just really value what an organization is doing, but we are very committed to keeping it at a similar number to the 12 that we have now. That was one of our criteria that we have. I was just going to read the criteria because it was tiny up there. We pursue a strategy of focusing on a smaller number of mission partners in order to build deep, meaningful relationships. Rather than giving small amounts of money to many organizations, we invest more significantly in a few, allowing for greater impact and closer collaboration. This focus on meaningful investment in fewer organizations is consistent with the more effective use of our staff resources and church members' capabilities, talents, and time. And then another thing that just through the process, a joy that has come out to me through this process and just through our work, is the relationships are so real. So just an example with supportive housing communities, the young adults have partnered with them and for the past probably about 3 years, and they go there at least once a month and do things like karaoke, or the Super Bowl Sunday, or a chili cook-off. They do cornhole. They just do all kinds of stuff, and they've built all these friendships. And last year, supportive housing communities picked the church, but really the young adults as their partner of the year. And just whenever I run into somebody that works there, they just gush about that relationship, and that's what it's all about. Same with Roof Above. They asked us to host their volunteer appreciation event here at the church 2 Sundays ago. And when the staff came in, they're all familiar faces, and through all the work that this church does is just incredible. But we really know the staff, and that gets to just the point of like, that is what we want it to look like, where we really are deeply connected in all the ways. Nikki always says, we know their kids' birthdays. Well, I don't know their kids' birthdays, but we know them well, and have relationships with them. Nikki knows her birthday, so I'll have to find that out from her before she leaves.
Roof Above, I mean, obviously the very strong connection with Room in the Inn, right? That is a deep partnership there. And so that certainly goes hand in hand. I will also say, just not from a surprise, but also from just a delighting, we all have those organizations out there that we really admire and maybe want to support. What the grants committee meeting has meant to me is learning that all the money that our congregation, the generosity of the congregation, comes from the money that people put into the offering plate or contribute every year. We take that very seriously, and having the confidence, knowing that there's a group here on campus that's part of this congregation that's dedicated to vetting out the whole process. Very important. I mean, that's, it gives me great comfort. Obviously, I've been part of the team, but I've seen that even when I roll off the team, knowing that the committee is going to continue to go through the process of making sure that these organizations are doing what they say they will be doing. There are deep partnerships, and so it gives confidence knowing that your money is going to be put to good use. It's an extension of what you're trying, what the church is trying to do.
This is not a question that we had planned, but I just wanted to point out that, when you look at the list of who the partners are, you might be kind of wondering like, well, where's Habitat in that? And where are our global mission partners? Where is Highland Renaissance Academy? So I just wanted to point out that there are a, mainly the work that we do. So in CIC Sunday and all the opportunities that are provided are with an official grant recipient. And there's a few things that lie outside of that, like Habitat Charlotte is, and I am interested in learning more about how this got decided, but the money that goes to them each year is not considered a grant because it often goes towards a specific project. So it'll be related to a particular house build or new neighborhood that's being purchased. So that is why it's not in the grants category. But we have a partnership with Habitat, and then with Highland, we have a line item in our budget that supports the work that we do there, but they don't receive a check from us for them to use in an unrestricted way. The funding that we give to them goes towards all the teacher appreciation events and the books we buy for Read Roar and those sorts of things. And then same with our global partners. They are not part of this. This is the local grant. So we do send funds every year to a variety of our global partners, and but those just aren't in the local grants.
Mandy, kind of on that, one of the, I think, most joyous occasions falls every year for our Christmas Eve offering. And I think oftentimes there's a local global balance to that. And sometimes we see a familiar partner that's a part of that. Can you just share, while you were kind of talking about some of those others, what that process is? Because it does seem to change kind of from year to year. And is that part of the grants, or is that a larger effort within mission and outreach to determine the purpose of our annual Christmas Eve offering?
Yeah, that's a fun thing that we think about all through the year when we learn of needs that someone has, or like with crisis assistance was the recipient of the Christmas Eve offering this year, knowing that it was their 50th anniversary. Um, we are just thinking all throughout the year, and by we I would mean the mission and outreach staff, and Bob is very involved in this, and the mission and outreach committee, and a lot of it we learned through the grants process of things that they have going on. And so it's not tied to the grants committee, but it is always to a grant recipient. And the trend is typically to have a local recipient and then one of our global partners to be a recipient. And again, they're in responding to needs. So I know one year, the Rangudi School in Kenya, the team that had been there saw that they didn't have a playground of any kind, and so that was the Christmas Eve offering based on a mission trip team coming back and saying like, oh, we really wish we could do that for them. The same thing, that can happen in Avery County. We're so fortunate right now because again, this is a whole separate bucket of money, but we have the hurricane relief funds that are funding a tremendous amount of work up in Avery County right now that are completely separate from any of this, and therefore for the time being wouldn't need a Christmas Eve offering focus. So we're just always looking at who has something special going on or a significant need that has come up.
Derek talked a little bit. Yes, Mr. Coley. Yeah.
Well, and that's even a different thing. So this church is just abundantly generous. And so the grants are just one part of how that generosity shows up with how we are able to support our partners financially. So the Walter is alluding to the announcement on Easter Sunday that the church is giving a $250,000 gift to crisis assistance. And that was a combination of of this annual grant that we do give them. There were some people who gave special gifts. It was the Christmas Eve offerings. It was a combination of funding that came together to be that $250,000 that came out of with it being their 50th anniversary. And there's a group of churches that are together giving $1 million to be a challenge grant. And so we were really happy to be a big part of that. That answer.
Thank you. And so Derek invited us to all think about folks that we think might be particularly gifted to serve on the grants committee and to share those names. What are some other ways that the congregation can be involved in supporting both the grant process and that human volunteering side of the relationships that we have with our partners?
Yeah, Janet certainly alluded to the first one. So certainly any ideas, please submit them or send them to, I guess, Mandy, whether they're individuals that could serve or potentially serve. Maybe you just have that you know some skill set they have, some interest that they have, or also maybe some organizations that you're aware of here in Charlotte that you think would be aligned with the church. Those two things. So providing those suggestions is critical. Certainly stewardship, right? The more money that's available, the more that we can do. We talked about some of those new organizations that have just come in, right? Whether it's this year or last year. If we bring more in, or if we give more to any of these, then something necessarily has to come down if our overall bucket doesn't change, right? So stewardship is certainly a part of it. So the more money that's available, the more that we can make a difference. And then I think finally is just the volunteering. Signing up for Covenant Impact Charlotte, signing up to go serve breakfast, signing up to do room in the inn. Those are critical ways of supporting what the grants community is trying to do. We're trying to build a relationship. We're certainly distributing the money, but through partnerships that Mandy has really gotten going, we're able to continue to do even more. So I think those are some big ones. Provide some suggestions on people or organizations that you think could be part of this. Number 2 is the stewardship, and then 3 is certainly getting out there and volunteering.
Now, I'll just build on the highlight of crisis assistance ministry a little bit. And as a math teacher, I kind of love the numbers here, that it's their 50th anniversary. So Covenant was able to generously give $250,000, and 25 plus 25 is 50. So we are also trying to match that with 250 volunteer hours. And I had the pleasure of going a Saturday or two ago, and it was, to your point, like when you get on the inside of some of these organizations, it just makes the whole relationship so much richer. I've dropped off before, but I'd never been on the backside, and to see the beautiful work that's happening behind the scenes and to meet the staff members, it just makes everything so much more real and live, and so much more an effort of human love and connection than a grant. So I think Mandy would be more than happy to help connect anybody specifically for us to fulfill that pledge that we made on Easter Sunday to Crisis Assistance Ministry. But the good news about all of these is that they are local partners, and there's really, like we said, that we wouldn't be giving them a grant if there wasn't also a way for us to connect with them. So I guess I'd encourage you to reach out to Mandy, check out the website. And then if sign up geniuses are ever an issue, you can always put something on your worship response card or call, and the teams would be happy to get you connected to the volunteer opportunities. Yeah. We do have.
Ask her to say that. I didn't ask her to say that, but that was a perfect plug.
Yeah. We have a few minutes, and we would like to take questions. Mary Parrish. Yeah. Thank you. So the question for those of you that may not have heard was a little bit of background about maybe some of those partners that we may not be as familiar with. So I don't know if we could put that maybe put that slide back up and just talk about some of those tier 2, tier 3 that everyone may not be as familiar with.
Think that's part of our job is to make sure people have chances to learn about the partners. Supportive housing communities is a housing first initiative. So they have a McCreesh Place is what most people are familiar with. They have a few other sites as well, but that's a housing first place with wraparound services for the folks that live there. Charlotte Family Housing, supportive housing communities is predominantly for individuals, and then Charlotte Family Housing, as the name says, is more for families. So they have locations in Plaza Midwood, and it's a place where it's a lot of moms and children that live there, and it's where they're coming out of being unhoused or maybe out of the incarceration situations, and it's all these wraparound services to help them with finding housing when they graduate from the program, training in financial literacy. Is that a good summary of them? And then I think most of you are familiar with Freedom School, CCT. I know you know very well, Mary Parrish, but CCT is the Center for Community Transitions, and it is where women serve their final 1 to 2 years of their incarceration. So they are officially still incarcerated, but they're living in a kind of a group home situation. And we have our circle that these 3 women all are part of that spends one Sunday a month with them, having dinner and painting fingernails and doing all kind of playing games, just fellowship together. Hope Haven is located right next to Highland Renaissance Academy, and Hope Haven is a place for individuals to go when they are coming out of a drug and alcohol rehab. And again, they have a tremendous success at people who go through their program and move into independent living situations that don't relapse compared to people that go straight from, a substance abuse program to trying to live on their own. How many of them do relapse? It's a beautiful community that just helps carry them and nurture them through the time after they get out of rehab. And the relatives is for children who are suddenly in maybe they're going to be in social services. Maybe they're going to be put in a foster situation or in a home, and they are there to take care of them while that's getting figured out. So there's an emergency housing place on East Boulevard, and then they have the center that Derek was talking about where any youth can go in for help. There's a lot of runaway children that they support, kids that have dropped out of school, and it's it's a beautiful place. And then Foster Village that you were asking about is a new organization this year, and they support the foster parents. So lots of people that foster children there are not near enough foster parents out there, and when people do it, they often don't do it again because it is so tough, and they're trying to get their kids to the children that they're fostering to all these doctor's appointments, reunification meetings with the parents. So Foster Village provides a place for the parent, the birth parent to meet with or grandparent to meet with the kids and have those meetings that they have to have for the reunification and all the appointments that they have. And they just support the families they provide them with. A family might get a call and say, can you have 3 kids come to your house tonight? And Foster Village shows up with bags of clothing and toiletries that they need. So they just are it's a group of women who were foster parents and are foster parents, and they know what those needs are. So that's a little bit about Foster Village.
Wow, that's a great summary. And I think you'll see there's a lot of uniqueness in some of those that you were just talking about, whether it's families or individuals or foster, like younger kids or maybe older kids. But there may be some overlap too in some of those. But we do try to make sure that we're trying to cover as many different life situations as possible.
Great. Other questions? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it makes a lot of sense. From our standpoint, with from just talk the financially speaking, we are dependent on like session approving the budget, right? And that's the way Covenant is set up, is to set the budget for the following year. I think staying close, and we talked about this in PE too. We're staying close to these partners because as much uncertainty as there is today, even versus last month versus last year, which seems light years away. I think if, like what you're talking about, they're going to know more about what their needs are sooner than we are. But I think in the close partnerships that we have through the Mandys of the world, through Bob Hendersons of the world, and staying close to what these organizations, these uncertain times that they're in, that's going to help us best serve them. So whether it is financial or, like you mentioned, intellectual, I think that's going to be even more, it's going to be even more important for us to really focus on the partnership rather than the transaction, right? I'm not aware. All the ones I'm aware of are on the calendar. Sorry. Good question.
I do think one of the things that came out of some of our recent session meetings and looking back at the Envision Task Force was this need to be able to be nimble, right? And to
Yeah.
be able to adjust. And we're a large congregation. We have the processes and procedures of the Presbyterian Church that we absolutely want to follow. But I think we're also showing that when something happens outside of that cycle, that we can feel the call and react. And I think Avery County, to some extent, is a great example of that. But I think you're raising a good point that we have to balance the process with the ability to try to be in lockstep or even maybe thinking a little bit ahead so that we're not caught reacting, but that we can be nimble and adjust to the changing times, regardless of kind of the month of the year. So I think that's a great reminder.
Yeah. So while we're looking out for 2026, we're forward thinking. Then I think having those partnerships, and hopefully I'm not reiterating this too much. Having those partnerships enables us to then sweep in when there is an additional need that we may not have known last month or last 6 months ago.
So thank you all for being here, and let's give our gratitude to Derek, Katie, and Mandy for their work all year long and for this morning and sharing that. And so, like I mentioned, this concludes our series for this year of our All-In Forums. But if there is a topic that we did not dive into that you would like for Grace and her team to think about as they're working on the programming for next year, let me know, let Grace know. We do always, we want to make sure that we're sharing the details behind the happenings of the church on the topics that are of most interest to you. So please feel free to share those. We are going to, as usual, kind of wrap this up so that we can get this space transformed for the family service. But again, thank you. Happy Mother's Day to our mothers here, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Thank you.